want to let you know that this is the annual meeting, and I want to run some numbers by you. If you have any questions, you can come up later and we'll discuss this. We'll discuss it from the floor. We have to tell you, I guess, by our bylaws that we have $17,795 in our savings account. We have $5,093.36. Remember the 36 cents because that's very important. That's in our checking account. And our investment account has $614,000. $101.18. So that's $614,102.16. That's the one with the big money. That's from over the years, all the shows and having all those thousands of people line up on the hill. That money was all saved and put together. So this club right now, we could probably continue on for another 15 years with no infusion of cash.
But don't give them any ideas.
But we're not going to give you any ideas.
John, the bottom line, we're solvent.
Yeah. Eat hearty, friends. The check ain't bouncing, that's for sure. We've got next month's meeting. We've got Eric Gould coming in from Rhode Island. Some of you who were with us on the Rhode Island trip, which was amazing. He is a member of the faculty, or is he?
No, he's Eric is a, and this is E-R-I-K Gould, not E-R-I-C. There's another.
There's a difference.
There is a difference. Eric is a urban landscape photographer.
John, stand in front.
Okay, Eric.
In brief, John.
Okay. Very, very good landscape photographer. Does a lot of urban work. He's also a staff photographer at the PHSNE Museum. So he's going to come up and talk to us about his own large format work and what the art scene in Rhode Island is like. It'll be a nice chaser to our trip earlier this fall. And he also shoots a Leica M6, so he can do Leica Babel for an hour afterwards if you want to.
This is a 35mm movie projector.
Wow.
And
wow.
It came on a stand where the film passed through it and into a box underneath it. There was no take-up reel. And it's a real anachronism, and it's more of a show and ask, because this has a beater mechanism. It's a hard rubber member that beats against the film to move it frame by frame through the projector. Yeah, an eccentric hard rubber member. And so beater mechanisms were essentially in the late 1800s. But here's one in a projector that has a motor on it that is from about 1911. And it is driven by a wheel with teeth on it that are in segments, so that as this wheel turns, each segment hits it, the beater moves, and then an empty area goes by until the next group of teeth come and rotate it again. So it moved in the correct intermittent
What the meeting should be. Well, a favorite picture, a favorite camera, something like that. And here is my favorite picture. I've had this hanging in the living room for many, many years. Dan Jones, who is not here, is really mystified with this picture and awed by it. Every time he sees me in the house and sees this picture, I get a long dissertation from him on how marvelous it is. Well, it's just a lighthouse, and it's a standard Kodak print. It came from a 35mm Kodachrome transparency. And it's, the lighthouse is at Glace Bay in Nova Scotia. It's a place where you have the boat that takes you to Newfoundland is just beyond the buildings here on the other side. In fact, the boat is hidden by the lighthouse because it was going by. Now, the picture was taken with a 3C Leica with nothing more than the Elmar on it. And at that time of life, and still today without a tripod. Just handheld, it goes from there. So my 3C, which is a version that has just the Elmar on it.
Came across, and it's an M3, but obviously all M3s are not the same. It has a between the lens shutter, but it does have a lever winder, and it's about one of the smaller rangefinder compact, 35 millimeter cameras. So just in case people are interested. Yes. And going to the other screen, I come across this recently. It's like a M3 on steroids. Yeah. It's a 2 1/4, 3 1/4 camera, so people be interested in seeing it. Right. And it was developed in Japan primarily for taking group portraits, I guess. And you can take 120 or 220 photos. Or they have the sheet film backs as well. And an interchangeable lens of 50, 65, and 150, which was 100.
Pause. It works.
Kick the one in down.
But then you get foggy inside. It is a nice camera, rugged, very German in design. This one, I have had this since 1974. I've taken a lot of pictures with it. This one also works. I've got all the accessories, with the exception of the ground glass adapter, which I have a line on. I may get it. These, I'll put this up against any light. Oh, I know they're great. And I've tried it. Challenge.
Fighting words in this room.
This is a Linhof on a stick, or as they call it, a Linhof 220. Shoots 120 or 220. Again, it's got the, which is this? Well, it's got the German lens on it, whichever one it is. In a synchro contour shutter. That's a little better now. Focus is right here, coupled rangefinder, built-in meter. The meter is the same one as used in the Argus Autronic. It's a Gaussian meter. Great camera. I wanted one of these ever since the first one I saw that I worked on, which was back in the mid-70s. And I'd worked on another half a dozen of them over the years. Get close, can't quite get it. This one walked into the show about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I watched its progress as the guy touted it across, and none of you guys bought it. Astounding. And once it was in my hands, it wasn't going anywhere. It's mine. And did you work on it?
Walt Friesendorf from Milford, New Hampshire. Two things. I want to make an announcement. A week from this Tuesday, it'll be on the 11th. I'm going to go to Vermont and visit Warren Patrick. So if there's anyone here who wants to send a message or send a gift or something, let me know. I'm very happy to be the courier. Okay? Just see me afterwards. This summer I was at a flea market, and this gentleman had a wooden Payco contact printer that he was selling, and this was on top of it. And I bought this, and just as a curiosity item, I mean, know what it is. I know what it is, but I assume everyone here knows what this is. Is anyone that does not? Okay. I took this to Henry will appreciate, to an New England Camera Club Council meeting of the Manchester Camera Club, and there were about 30, 40 people present. Some of them still have dark rooms. And I showed this, and I said, does anyone know what this is? And not a soul knew what it was. The closest that someone finally in the end, out of desperation, said, it's a dish dryer. So I just want you to know that, we're losing photography today. If it wasn't for us, nobody would know what these artifacts are. And it's a common thing.
I could tell what it was right away. The reason I know is back in probably the 80s, I was working on a research project at Raytheon where we were using 4x5 Kodak high-resolution plates. And I basically had to make something from scratch, and I didn't know that they existed in, you know, in antiques. I had to make something that was very similar to that.
Yeah, there are larger ones too.
Yeah, I had to make it out of plastic, you know, like a machine shop, make it, but it ended up looking not unlike
And
that.
this guy tried to tell me that this goes with the Payco. I wanted this, I had to buy the Payco. But anyway, but the Payco would have been a nice coffee table, you know, restoration or something, but it was an old wooden Payco, probably from the 20s or the 30s.
Walt, is that Eastman Kodak? Does that say Eastman Kodak on it?
I can't see anything, any names on it at all.
Usually it's on the side.
Yeah,
Yeah, usually they're on the side. Okay.
Probably Burke and James.
I wouldn't be surprised. I hadn't really scrutinized it for a name, to be honest
Or
with you.
Anthony,
Or Anthony.
could be a CD holder.
I brought in my favorite little camera. When I was just starting collecting, I used to lust over Plaubo Maquinas. You remember them? They're you know, 6x9 folding cameras and high quality. And then later I started collecting 3x4 centimeter cameras, such as this one. They get 16 pictures on a roll of 127, and it's vertical format. This is a Plaubo Maquinet, and it's the neatest little thing in my collection. I have about 25 of these of this size. So here I'll collapse it by squeezing these two buttons. So you can see it's pretty small. It has a 2.8 lens and full shutter speeds. They all work, which is amazing.
Got a 50mm lens on there?
50.
Yeah.
So what? And here's the viewfinder. For horizontal, you take it like this, and you put the number 1 and then 1 here, and then 2, 2 like that. So what else do you want to know? Oh, on eBay, I found this little ad. Somebody put it on a magnet, and they're selling the ad for these things for $70.
Worth every penny.
Yeah. Vest pocket camera, fast f2.7 anti-chroma lens. Used any standard make vest pocket film. Takes 16 pictures on standard exposure film. Has 3 important adjustment scales: focus, diaphragm, and depth of focus on one side that can be seen at a glance. Shutter speeds to 300th. So that's the usual stuff there. That's kind of fun.
I was trying to take a picture of a church, and I think it was in Lexington, which had a nice creche on the front lawn, and the church was illuminated at night. I was going to take a picture of it and make a Christmas card. You know, I guess Kodak in those days would take a slide and make Christmas cards out of your slide. So the tripod head I had at the time, I want to take vertical, it was a church, so I want to take vertical format. Well, I had my camera on the tripod head, and I guess the top of it leaned over, and I'm trying to adjust the angle for the vertical format and looking uphill at the church, and the ground was uneven, so the tripod was somewhat tipped. And I was wrestling around with it for probably 10 minutes, and just when I got it finally lined up and I was ready to push the button, they turned the lights off on me. I was hopping mad, but that was my last chance. So I went and said, I'm going to fix that problem. You know, so I designed a tripod head. And my father-in-law, and here's the historical connection, my father-in-law had a little machine shop in his basement. My father-in-law was Curtis K. Pinkham, who was the son of Pinkham and Smith. So this might be said to be the last product of Pinkham and Smith in a certain sense. But anyway, it's a ball head. However, if you want vertical format and looking uphill, that's no problem. You can go uphill, downhill, any way you like. And it's very fast. You have a tightening handle here. And it was before the days of quick release plates, so my solution to that problem was I have a little universal joint here on the screw. You flip it out, use it as a lever, and then you spin it. Off comes the camera very quickly, or you know, vice versa to put it back on.
John Toe's Tiverton, Rhode Island, and I'm kind of a sucker for anything with the name Graflex on it. We all know what that leads to. Back in the 50s, when the handwriting began to be on the wall for Graflex, they tried to expand it to 35mm. One of their early attempts was to buy out an American company, Ciro, and this is just an example where it says Ciro on the front, and then engraved in the back is Graflex Incorporated, Rochester, New York. So it's a, you know, typical late 40s, separate rangefinder, viewfinder thing, and self-cocking shutter. But again, just an example of Graflex trying to preserve or make a new market, not particularly successfully. The other end of that story comes in the late 50s, early 60s, where again, this is actually a Kawa camera that doesn't really work. But again, it said Graflex on it. I didn't pay $40 for it. I think it came off a dollar table, I hope. But I don't really remember. So they were, you know, basically subcontracting out to the Orient. So that's the beginning, that's the end. The interesting camera is the one in the middle, where they basically took something that looks like this chassis with a radical redesign. I've got some scrap film in here so I can cock it. So that winding the film cock will wind ahead. You have to separately cock the shutter, which I've done. But the focusing is, as far as I know, unique. It's a rocker mechanism like this. So you're welcome to get up and use it later if you be a little careful with it, because it's a little bit stiff. And you, again, focus like that, you know, with that. Switch to your viewing window. The shutter is also unique. It doesn't go from the top, it goes to the side. So once you get the hang of using the camera, you're actually moving against your palm. Like that. Very unique economics.
First is not very old. In fact, it's probably pretty modern. It's a point and shoot, and I can't figure out whether an individual had it and took the whole cover off, or whether the company provided it to dealers to show something. It's a fully functioning camera. Of course, when you shoot, you don't see anything. It's all circuits and stuff. First thing was to figure out what camera it was. It says Canon somewhere on here, but nothing else. So I took a few pictures with it, and I put it in Lightroom and looked at the EXIF data, and it told me what camera it was. My original thought was to carry this around, take pictures. It's a good talking point with people. But something someone said here earlier gave me an idea. I have my first camera I ever owned when I was 10 was an Argus Argoflex. You know, one of those little twin lens point and shoot. I have another copy of that. Maybe I should take it apart and see if I can mount this showing this mechanism and mount next to it show the Argoflex mechanism and see the difference between the mechanical and the electronic. So it sounds like it might be fun to do. Okay.
Thank you. Today's meeting was non-camera.
Cool.
And I have here a little sculpture given to me by a friend of mine. She didn't make it. The artist is unknown, but just a little stick figure holding a little wooden camera. You can tell it's old because the camera's held up to the face instead of out here.
What do you mean old?
The history of this camera is what makes it interesting to me. It's a little Rolly 35mm camera. Now originally the gentleman by the name of Dan Clark owned this camera. He puts in pilings and stuff. He worked in the Woods Hole area. And if any of you are familiar with Woods Hole, there's a drawbridge that goes, lets the inlet go into the inner harbor. Well, apparently Dan was putting pilings in the inner harbor, which is brackish, meaning part fresh water, part salt. And this camera was on the work barge. And somehow it got knocked into the water. And it was about 30 feet of water. And there it sat for about a month in this salt, brackish water. And they had divers in doing something else, and they happened to find the camera. Now he took it to a gentleman by the name of Mike DePunty, who worked at the time at Orton's Photo, and later on owned New England Camera Service. and wanted an estimate of what he thought would cost to repair the camera. And the cost to repair it they came up with was worth more than the camera. So Dan took the camera back home, put it on the shelf. And about 2 months later, he decided that, well, it was no good, so he took it to Mike and gave it to him for a parts camera. There it sat again for a short period of time. And finally Mike decided, after seeing it sit on the shelf for probably another month or two, decided to take it apart and see what condition it was in. As he got into it, and it's got a Zeiss lens, a Tessar lens, 40mm, 3.5. It's got a built-in light meter. It uses a small battery. It uses standard 35mm film. So he started taking it apart piece by piece. And he found, luckily for some reason, that there was very little corrosion and so on. The biggest problem was in the shutter blades. It had pitted and had a couple of pinholes. So he filled them in with black paint and polished them down to fill in the pinholes. And he went through the thing, and he actually ended up drying out the meter and completely went through it, did a clean lube adjust, put it back together. And lo and behold.
And the other things I brought in were a bunch of Leifers. I brought some old ones. I have the oldest one I have here is a 1929 that was converted from an A, which was a fixed lens, a collapsible fixed lens camera, to a C, which meant that you could interchange lenses. I have a homemade, I guess shop-made, brass barrel with a Kodak lens and a hood I happen to have. And it fits right on here, and it conforms to the mask that was put on by Leica when it was converted so that you could use telephoto lenses with it. And I also have, to go with it, I have an old Bosch & Lomb Tessar that I had a base made for it, a converter so you could put it onto this. So it's 4.5, 32mm. Anything, what's wider than anything Leica made at the time. So it looks really good on the colors right and everything. So that's this one, this outfit. And just to
you did a good job on the dessert table, but you know what? There's always room for Italian cookies. So please, eat up. And you're welcome to go around and take a look at some of this stuff and get hands-on inspection.
I have a nice pressure relief valve on it. I don't know what kind of case this was. But I know all this Nikon stuff was in it. He doesn't shoot film anymore. Does it make any difference to him? I don't think I'm not going to give it to him.